What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to take a look back at Danganronpa, an amazing, amazing game. And I'm going to say that word probably 1,001 times in this video because, look, I don't play a lot of these type of games. This was really one of the first ones of its kind that I jumped in, and it never disappoints. Now, this is actually only the second time I've ever played it, and I will say, I think for a detective kind of whodunit type, and in fact, actually, I think Monokuma says that rather early on, right? It is a whodunit type game, and for these type of games, I don't know if I need to play it yearly. I don't know, playing it the 10th time versus the second time, is it really worth it? Because I'll say, and I'll probably bring this up as we go along through this video, it's such a weird thing in my mind because some things I feel I almost purposely block. A big part of this game is about forgetting and amnesia and things like that, and I feel like I almost did what a certain character in this game did to everybody else, where I had selective memory. Some of the things as soon as I saw a room, I said, oh, I remember that room. Oh, I remember this trial. Oh, I remember kind of the twist that happens sometimes. There was actually one twist I had forgotten about, and maybe I Dumbledored it out of my mind, but what an amazing freaking game. Some killer characters. I mean, they do kill each other, but amazing, amazing characters. Such well-written dialogue. You fall in love with so many of them. And honestly, you got your survivors. You got people that last quite a while in this game. And I would even say some of the earlier characters make a really big impact as well. It's not just, the best characters are the ones to make it to the end. I do think those are some of the stronger characters in the entire game, but there's plenty like Sakura or Sayaka or Mondo, or you can go down the list. Like, there are some phenomenal characters. Of course, Monokuma is kind of a life of his own, just kind of takes up the whole screen in terms of personality. Such a phenomenal character, but yeah, just so well written, so many really amazing twists. I mean, this is a game that you pay attention to everything, right? And this is the part that I think is actually interesting playing it for the second time, is you can see a lot more, when you're doing your detective stuff. I would actually argue, especially towards the end, the final trial, and really the morgue, when you're looking at the morgue and the lights, that is such a critical hint that you'll get to. The trials will always flesh out what you find in your detective work, but if you're really paying attention and you're really, capable, you can kind of figure it out as you're going. And then, yeah, some things I think stand out a little bit more now than they did back then. You can see certain things kind of coming. I would think Sayaka, kind of towards the beginning. The first time I played this, my jaw hit the floor for that. It hit the floor, I think, maybe 15 different times in this game, but definitely, I did not see that coming. Upon replaying it 8 years later, it was actually played this 8 years ago, I thought, you know what? I should have been able to see that one because maybe I'm just more in tune with the whodunit formula thanks to Scream and other things. Such beautiful visuals, the comic strips, when you're doing the trial. I could go on, and well, that's really what this video actually is for, though, so I'm going to keep rambling. Every part of this game is super good. The characters are phenomenal. Again, the dialogue, the twists are so good, and they space it out really well. The pacing of this game, it's a long one. This is a long game, and even if you're a fast reader and you're able to kind of, click through dialogue rather fast, which is what I did, this is still a game that's going to be, 20 plus hours long, and it never feels like it. It actually, by the time you end, you don't want it to be over. I want it to keep going with these. I never want to put these characters down. Byakuya or Kyoko or any of really, the final group, yeah. You're so attached to them at that point that it's like, well, I never want to say goodbye to you. This is really a game that has such a phenomenal, we talk about cast, and I like to talk about cast and not just necessarily best performance. Game Awards does that. Best performance from a game. Yes, there are some amazing performances, but what about games that just have some of the greatest all-star cast lineups that you've ever seen in your life? Is there many games that can beat Danganronpa? I really don't think so, because Makoto, top to bottom, main character to kind of throwaway characters, even though, I'm not even a big fan of, Hifume, right? He kind of bothers me. He's kind of annoying. But even he has some charm. He's got some personality. He rounds out a 16, 17 character kind of, cast that you got going on here. So just a phenomenal game and one of the best, I think, of its kind. And not just of its kind. I think one of the best games ever created, to be honest with you. Okay, so there was like your massive recap. So let's go into, a little bit more of the specifics. So it's a game that's broken up over 6 chapters and 6 trials, right? And you're going through, and this is where I think the pacing would come in rather well. The game, I think, has such a great way of allowing you time to get to know each other, of allowing you time to kind of build. So I would say, like, maybe conversations of building up with, like, alter ego. So this is post Chihiro's death and all that, right? You go in, and I guess what I'm trying to say is they give you, a couple times, a couple even days, I believe, where you're able to just kind of build the story. See, the game's not really broken down by just like somebody kills somebody and then trial, and somebody kills somebody, trial. It gives you not just moments to do like the bonding thing, which I think I took more advantage of this time than I did before. This is a way of like actually learning a little bit more about the people. You don't ever know like everything, and I like that. I honestly like that. And some characters, because you can do these bonding exercises with people multiple times, well, it depends on the order that you do. Now, I always kind of pick my favorites. The game actually forces you early to do Sayaka, which kind of wastes your bonding opportunity because she's the first one taken out. But, as you go through the game, you're able to bond, and you're able to do it, several times. But the issue is if you're picking people that are going to get taken out, in the main trials and in the main deaths, right? That's not gonna, you can get skills from them, and those can eventually help you, and that actually is kind of a sub strategy, right? Like go after the people that are gonna die first and try to max out that bond, or get it to where you can get the skill point, right? So that way at least you have the skill point. But it's not just that, it's just story moments, it's character moments, it's just kind of having these characters bond, meeting in the dining hall, and you do it like 50 times in the game. You think it would get repetitive. It does get repetitive in terms of like, you wake up and Makoto says, I should head to the dining hall. That gets repetitive. But every time you go to the dining hall, it's something. It's character building. It's story building. It's Monokuma's going to surprise you with something. It's a character is going to start to plant a seed of doubt with another character, or that character is going to act suspicious in some way. There's always something that happens really at all times. After a trial, a new part of the school opens up. So there's your kind of first detective work. It's not a trial detective or an investigation, I think is what they call that, right? But you just go around, you say, okay, here's all these new rooms. Then you start to think in your mind, okay, how could these rooms start to participate in a murder down the line? Because ultimately, most of the rooms do that, right? You open up the school, you investigate, you either find something out about the school, you find something out that maybe connects to a character or connects to the school, pushing the mystery forward, or you kind of find something where it's like, okay, something's going to happen here, or you find like the tool shed and you say, oh, okay, something. Actually the tool shed's a weird example because you think about the tool shed, in like the garden in the final floor, and you think about like the flower, you think that's going to have some impact on it. Turns out no. And then you think like the tool shed, because there's kind of weapons in there. It's like throwaway evidence, but it's not something that's going to directly, I guess the tarp is really what actually, ends up being placed there. So sometimes they don't have meaning, but really, for the most part, every room at some point or another plays a part. Even rooms that are locked, eventually, at the very, very end of the game, will become unlocked and you'll be able to explore. And may I just say, and because, again, we're kind of just looking at everything, I don't care about spoilers. It's a game that's pretty darn old at this point, 15 years old, actually, right? Started originally, I believe, on the Vita. That's an incredible story, and greatness from small beginnings, as Nathan Drake would say. This is a game that also has a really interesting theme to it. The theme, it's a game that really is explained to you quite heavily at the very end. In fact, Junko, of course, joking around like she doesn't like the exposition and she doesn't like having to explain it. This idea of despair and hope, right? And it's always there. And by the way, one of the greatest, I think, twists in all of gaming, maybe I'll make a video just talking about the ending, because even 15 years later, the ending is so powerful in the sense that it really boils down to these are characters that went to a school, they bonded, they were friends, they lost their memories. Junko and Mukura actually took them, but whatever. So they lose their memories of the friendships and the bonds that they created with each other. And to get out of the school, they started to kill each other. Even though they're the ones who barricaded themselves in the school, they agreed to the school, they knew what was going on, and this idea of again, like trying to show despair to the entire world, right? There's some people left that have hope, and so we're going to broadcast these ultimate gifted kids, and the ones that should probably have the most hope, and the ones that kind of do have hope of leaving, only despair is going to start to like wipe them out. And despair is kind of like this contagious virus that can move across the world. What an incredible like worldview type theme. I mean, it's a game that plays with things that are so much bigger than itself. At the same time, it knows also when to kind of keep it condensed, because it juggles both of them so well. The despair and the hope and the mystery of the school that is just, it's ongoing throughout the entire time. Who's the headmaster? Is the headmaster the mastermind? Is the mastermind one of us? Is there a traitor? Then there actually is a traitor, but you kind of only, I think originally the game is trying to point you towards Kyoko as the traitor, even though she's not. And actually it kind of circles back down to that point where it's like, well, there's always something kind of weird about her, but you just don't really know until the ending. The game is so good at juggling that I guess that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. The game is capable of focusing on a trial and just doing those kind of twists so perfectly, where, I mean, you think about the trial of like Hifume, right, where they're basically playing around with, you think characters are dead, then they're not. Actually, he gets up and he walks around, and you got Robo Justice playing around with that. I mean, it's such a convoluted, complicated trial that's so rewarding, by the way, and I think all of the trials to various extents, but they really all are in general, they're all very rewarding when you figure it out. And that's the thing, I guess, replaying it for a second time, there were some things that I remembered. You remember maybe the killer. You remember, say, a twist. Like when he's dead, quote unquote, in the nurse's room, I remembered, oh, no, that's not, because then, of course, they make their way to a different room, and you say, how could somebody move somebody like him? And then you remember, oh, I already played it. Of course, it's because he just gets up and walks. There were some times, that happened, but, like Mondo, when he did his death to Chihiro, I actually forgot that was a thing. I sometimes, especially early on in the game, I forgot the death order. So I was actually unsure of who was going to come next. I forgot at times who killed each other, and then why did they kill each other. Actually, with Chihiro, and it gets into, I think it's more sensitive topic, modern time, I forgot the big twist with him. The fact that, of what they did, him versus her, I literally did not remember that whatsoever. And that's such a huge freaking part, of that trial. Going towards the end, when you can call Kyoto out on her lie, or if you, and that's the bad ending, right, if you do that, versus if you roll with it, Makoto is found guilty and you go through the whole garbage chute and all that. I forgot, like, where that went. Letting it go. What does letting it go do, in the context of the trial? I forgot. I mean, and I love that. I love that my memory is selectively good at times, because I really think, for a game like this, it is really cool. It is cool, okay, to find things you didn't find the first time. I would say, like, Sayaka, you can see it coming. I mean, the game is pushing her on you, and the way she talks about you, and then those were things, that you kind of remember upon playing it the first time and you go into the second time. The way she's acting, and it's like, right before, I think the final time you talk to her, she talks about, like, well, you would be able to help me through, like, anything, right? Any promises, that kind of idea. So it's like, okay, that's already this informal, invitation that if she kills somebody, she's going to blame you, and you're going to take it for her because you've been buddy-buddy, and you kind of made a pact that, you would defend her in that way. So, that's that kind of second time flair, where the first time you're like, oh yeah, she's cute, she's a cool character, she seems nice, she's the only one that really has this kind of outward personality towards you. You've met her before, you went to junior high or whatever it was with her. She's a really fascinating character, and you're kind of almost mesmerized by that, right? And then other things happen. And then even like the two smart Alex of the group, Byakuya and then Kyoko, like those two kind of play very vital roles in all of the trials. They're, and that's something I think I realized second time as well, is almost the setup and why you needed to keep people like Hiro and Hina alive, because like those two, look, they made it for a reason, and they can have smarts, they can figure things out, but generally they're kind of like the not smartest people, of that group. And why I say that is, like, you think about the trials and you think about the idea of you're literally looking for the statements that have a contradiction, right? Like the statements that you have something that can counter it. And yes, as it goes, especially say that second to last trial 5, right? When Kyoko is clearly like she's off her game, and because everything's kind of pushed towards her on purpose, right? So she's on the back foot. And okay, in that moment, you can kind of call her out. Byakuya isn't always perfect, and I like that about him, right? Because he's so high on himself. He always thinks he has the right answer right away, but sometimes he misses things, right? But then you have the other two, and those two are kind of the characters that will oftentimes bring up the things that you have to shoot. And it's almost like a hidden, I would even say Toko as well, like her versus Genocide Jill. I mean, and by the way, what a great character there. Kind of too, they kind of water her down to just being a master's girl, that I'm not a huge fan of, but what an interesting character nonetheless. But I just think from how the game is set up, like literally the gameplay elements and the kind of characteristics you need to have with these people, that's something I really didn't notice until now, where it's like you kind of needed this blend of people that were super smart and kind of like knew, they were able to lead you in the beginning trials. They're kind of your tutorial. They're kind of your helping hand to say like, okay, well, look, there's words on the bottom of the screen, right? It'll walk you through it, but Kyoko will bring up like, well, you should know this, Makoto. Like, think about this. Like, why? And then even Byakuya, why don't you tell them, Makoto? You should know this. And it's like they kind of throw it to you that's a character way too, right? Where it's like, okay, it's almost like a trusting thing, and they know you got it. But at the same time, it's almost a helping hand. They're kind of helping you through the game at times. But you also kind of have to have a counterweight to that, which is characters that are a little bit less in the loop, And I will say, from character-wise and from just the game in general, these are characters that I guess just don't investigate everything that they should. Because as I was especially the end, the final part where it's like, I think Hiro says something like, well, what if the mastermind is like 100 miles away? And it's like, did you not go into the control room? Maybe not, because it was locked, so I guess maybe you and Hino were the only ones. But there were just several instances, in the trial. Yes, characters would sometimes be like blocked out, or some characters wouldn't be allowed to do something. But sometimes characters just like flat out miss things, and it's like that's why you kind of had to educate them, in the trial. But that goes, I think, to just the flow and the structure of the game. Going back to one of my earliest comments, like the ability to build characters, the ability to hang out with them and kind of have that, sub mini game, bonding type thing. But then to have so many moments in the daily school life of just learning, learning about the school, learning about the hidden mystery, learning about each other, which is so freaking important, right? Because that's just such a big part, to the overall game. Why would a character do something that, that would what would need to happen to a character, to push them into doing something? And then, of course, like that seed, well, of course, like the hidden mystery of the game, right? This idea of despair, the ultimate twist of, you guys kind of asked for this, and all we did now was push you to do this. And ultimately, Monokuma / Junko, which, by the way, Junko, amazing, of course, makes so much with so little time on screen. But like the whole idea too is like, if they just accepted their life there, they don't got to kill. They don't got to do anything. They have unlimited resources there. And yes, it's a game for the outside world, so there would be a push to eliminate people. But, for the most part, like, especially the ending, right? If you sacrifice Makoto, you can just live here forever. And if you believe Junko that the outside world is a mess, you might want to do that, right? Because living there in kind of harmony is better than going outside, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of distrust and all that jazz. It's just such like I said, and I keep saying, it balances everything so well. Whenever you get bored. When do you get bored? Because the trials are insane. The characters are larger tthan life, and they always keep some around that, again, I would say by the end, you got characters that are a little bit more mellow. I probably think that's why Genocide Jill / Toko is still there, because by the time you get to like the bottom 6, they're all somewhat level-headed. You know, like Hina will maybe kill you for a donut. Hero is like a character that can, you know, read predictions accurately like 20% of the time. So you have like something kind of off with these people, but they're kind of mellow enough. And then Genocide Jill kind of adds that extra flair. But okay, well, in moments like that, the trials are insane. You have a body that you have no idea what you're doing with or what happened, like who could have done something like this. There's always something. You think about like Sakura's, you know, trial where, you know, you're looking for a killer that doesn't exist. It's her herself. The person who died is the killer. Every trial, like I said, either has some sort of twist or maybe it's got two killers technically. You think about the Celeste one, right, which is the dual kill one, and technically the dual killer one because Fume did it, the first one. Like everything has something that's keeping you engaged. And when things kind of calm down with the twist, it's more about the characters, or when things kind of die down with the characters, it's about the mystery of the school. They just do it so well. The game is really such a almost perfect game. This game also can, by the way, I feel like be played whenever. This is a game that ages so well because of the visuals. You know, the only thing that I think actually hurts this game in terms of like being a relic of the time is honestly the bullet battle mini game that you're doing in the trials. The only thing that I found, I was playing on PS5, there's like 10 different versions of these games. It's kind of like Kingdom Hearts where they combine them and stuff. I think I'm playing the 1-2 reload version, and when you do the bullet time one, the first time there's like a little bit of a lag, and so when you're doing the you know, trying to match the pace, match the rhythm, it's not always perfect. That's like the only thing technology wise that doesn't age well. You know, when you have a game that's just so beautifully drawn and animated and all that jazz, I mean, like it's got the cutscenes, I think, are phenomenal. The voice acting, something I didn't really talk about. You know, obviously you don't hear them talk too much, and you know, it's an interesting thing. Obviously, look, older games have that a lot. You know, you go back to the 90s and the early 2000s, a lot of games, the characters, you think about how much of an important character, say, Aerith was when you didn't even, you know what I mean? Like, some of these characters, you have to just write them insanely well. And for a game like this, it's kind of another reminder that, yeah, you know, their voices will be there from time to time, and I feel like there's not a weak actor. I think there's maybe weaker characters, but I don't know if there's a weak actor in that room. You know, I think all those actors are so unbelievably talented. But, you know, they don't, I wouldn't really say they carry. Maybe Junko, because Junko's the one that maybe talks the most versus her lines of dialogue. Most of these characters have to rely on you reading and the reading kind of coming through. And, you know, it's up for those voice actors, or it's up to those voice actors to emphasize what they kind of are like in the limited time they're able to talk. Does that make sense? When they get 2 lines of dialogue and then you have to read like, you know, 15 lines from them, those 2 lines have to encapsulate their entire character. So then when you read the other 15, you think, okay, I have to read it like she would say it or like he would say it, right? How would they emphasize this word? How would they, you know, Hifume is always screaming, always so kind of perverted, right? How would he do it? Well, you kind of have to hear him. You kind of have to kind of build that personality a little bit and then let the dialogue and let just reading text that has to do really the heavy lifting. And so I don't think that'll ever age. The visuals will never age. This is such a nice, I mean, the characters just look so nice. They're like the perfect of a lot of different things. So, you know, you have a very like nice cast to like look at, a lot of very attractive female and male characters, like kind of these perfect specimens, which to be honest with you is kind of the point, right? They're kind of supposed to be the best at what they do. So, I mean, just honestly, the visual style, how it's all done, Monokuma's personality, technically Junko. It's weird because, like, do you consider Monokuma a character? The ending might say yes, but technically Junko's doing it the whole time. So there's just so many amazing characters, so many twists, so much great dialogue. It's just a masterpiece of a game. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.